My name is Janine Stalin, and I'm with EKGF, obviously. And I'm here to welcome you to our EKGF 2023 programs meeting. And we're all really happy to have you here. Also joining us from EKGF is Marcel Fröhlich, who's on the board, Jacobus Zaluk, who is also a board member, Dennis Wisnowski, same, and Pete Rivette. And I also see Omar Brian Kahn on the meeting, and he is one of our pillar leaders. And so with that, I'm really happy to see everyone here. And if you have any questions during the meeting, I would ask you to hold off until the end. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the meeting. You can also email us, info@ekgf.org. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to have you all join us. We are going to have a brief agenda, brief meeting this morning, and talk about what we've done, who we are, our work groups, especially a brand new one, a data product work group, and then have a lot of time for you all to interact with us, probably about 1/4 of this meeting. So next slide, please, Jacobus. We exist for the good of the overall world enterprise doing knowledge graphs. The marketplace is attested to by the very many people, in fact, at this meeting. We work on a shared infrastructure. That means supplying keys to GitHub and to Slack and to other tools. We have a community that we support and who supports us. Our first product was a maturity model, which Jacobus is going to go into, and especially governance, best practice for the industry overall. Next slide, please. We are a legitimate organization, a 501c6. We have bylaws that are on our website. We ask and need income to fund research, content support, and in general, to keep operations going, which has primarily been Janine's responsibility. Next slide, please. We have a board of directors as stipulated by our bylaws. Janine is actually the operations manager, so technically she's not on the board, but currently it's myself, Jacobus, Marcel, Pete. And push the button, please, Jacobus. I'm making an ask here. Our board is only is 4 people at the moment. We'd like to have 9. So we're looking for participants, looking for applicants, must be corporate or academic member. Our bylaws state that we should be oriented more towards users than vendors. Right now, that's not the case. So we would like to have users, whether academic or corporate, members in good standing. That means they pay the dues to become on our board. So welcome. Please let me know or do the info@ekg.org if you'd like to be interested. I'd like to be considered to be on the board. Next slide. Most importantly, we have EKGF group leaders. These are the people who do the work. The 2 kinds of, back please, 2 kinds of work. The left side of the slide is our work groups. The existing ones are maturity and methods, led by Jacobus, and a new one, which Jacobus is going to talk about, data product, led by Tony Seal. On the right side are the special interest groups. Those of you who have participated with us in the past were working on pillars. We changed the pillars for reasons I'm going to explain in a moment to special interest groups, led by Pete, Diane, and Omar. Next slide. What we've done so far. We have deliverables that Jacobus is going to show you on our various websites. Our principles, our maturity model, which we first released very early in 2020 and then in 2021, and then published formally in 2022, access free and open for all the world to see. We have many organizations, companies large and small, depending upon the maturity model, which is something that's never going to be finished because times change. Methods, which are how to do these knowledge graphs, and the catalog of all the products we've ever had and will have. We've done papers and articles, we've done tutorials, we have done a couple of industry surveys, and we started an EKG heads call. That means people who've actually implemented and are implementing knowledge graphs in their organizations. Especially, I'm proud of the fact that we have a content development and maintenance process, which Jacobus is going to go into at the end of this talk. Next slide, please. Next, we've been very successful and happy with our maturity model. We spend a whole lot of time on, of course, maturity models are in some cases contentious and argumentative and always tedious because people always have his or her own ideas about what and how it works in their organization, and that's all fine. So we have done that. Now we're in a maintenance mode. Ask people where they are on that graph of maturity, but we're moving on, and we're moving on to the next step. So we no longer have these pillars we've talked about, which are in the maturity model. When I shouldn't say we no longer have them, they exist, but we want to expand beyond simply pillars, letting the special interest groups do what they want to do. And it's up to the leadership to fold what happens in the special interest groups back into the maturity model, back into the overall deliverables that we are producing, whether they're chunky or they are within the stream of what we want to have happen. We'll see as we go forward. So in that spirit, we would like your feedback and participation. That's what this meeting is all about, getting new people to get involved with what we're doing. Next slide, please. This is turn it over to Jacobus. He's going to explain our work group structure, which is based upon deliverables, and show you some real content in real time. Take it away, Jacobus.
Thank you, Dennis. So yeah, this picture, we have published that before. This is basically what we call the 4 quadrants picture. And there's the 4 main deliverables that we've been working on. We started with the principles, and then we published the 10 principles for EKG. What makes an EKG an EKG? And that's about identity resolution and meaning resolution and self-describing data sets and so forth. We also added to that last year the purposeful business themes. So why would you want an EKG in the first place? So I will show that in a minute. Then the next focus was the maturity model. The structure of the maturity model stands, but there's still a lot of detail that we need to add, and it's a continuous process. But basically, this is all about expectation management. The maturity model basically shows you 5 levels of maturity. You cannot expect nirvana straight away. You have to kind of work your way up, and we are trying to address that for audiences. The business audience, our primary audience, actually, the people with the money that want an EKG, and we have to explain to them, why do you want an EKG, and how does that impact your business, and what do you need to do on the business side to make this happen. Like, for example, you have to have a vision. That would be good. But also the organization audience, like all the project managers, program managers, all kinds of financial people. How does EKG impact their work, and vice versa? Then we have the data story, and that's where I think we have the best content at the moment. So the data pillar is worked out quite well by Pete Rivet. He was leading this, and he's still leading this. So we have a lot of descriptions there about what to do with your data in a semantic technology context. And the technology pillar still needs a lot of work, and we keep on going there. Then we also started the method website, which is basically a framework methodology. It's not meant to be a micromanagement kind of methodology. We're not going to explain in detail how to build an ontology because we will never agree on that. There's so many different ways of doing things. But in general, like if you really want to manage a large-scale enterprise knowledge graph serving many use cases across many lines of business, then of course you need to have some sort of methods, a structured approach. Then we, last but not least, we have the catalog website where we plan to produce to publish, let's say, all the various reusable components, such as use case descriptions, first of all, but also executable use cases which is already running in a few places. So we know that this works, but we need to further develop it and make it a standard. And ideally, the catalog becomes kind of a place where people download stuff. They download data products, data sets, public data sets, or descriptions of those public data sets and data products, and make it easy for people to get going. The use case tree in the middle is basically the central concept, the central artifact that links everything together. So before I show the next slide, let me first show you the websites. I need to get out of full screen mode here for a second and go to my web browser. Oops. So let's start with the principles website. You see the 10 principles here. This is about identity resolution, meaning resolution, and we think that your enterprise knowledge graph is a distributed. It's a graph of graphs. It's a distributed thing. In that sense, comparable to data mesh. It's kind of a semantic data mesh, you could say. So that is a checkbox. Right? Like, is your graph distributed? Yes. Okay. Then you have done an important part for establishing an EKG. Is it based on open world principles? Does it have self-describing data sets, data products? Are things measurable? Does it have business orientation? Do you have well-defined use cases, for example? And so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of content behind this, and we would love to have your response, your reaction to this. We also added these themes, like what are the reasons to have an EKG in place. You want more accountability, more fairness. You want to create a composable business. You want to improve reusability. Pick one or two of these themes and make that your focus. And we also, last but not least, I would like to get your attention for this. We made a mapping to the FAIR principles. You could basically say that the 10 EKG principles are a superset of FAIR. Then the maturity model is, you've probably seen this picture before. We have these 4 pillars and the 5 levels. It's kind of a simplistic model, like you have to do something. So we have these 4 audiences. We want to tell the story to these 4 in 4 different ways. And believe it or not, like if you talk to data people, then the story for EKG is completely different than when you talk to business people, for example. Business people don't really care about RDF triples, and for data people, that's everything. So like there's a different story to tell. So we want to tell that story in all 4 different ways and explain what are the levels. And we could have chosen 6 levels or 10 levels, but we ended up with 5. So in that maturity model, you can see that the various pillars, for example, for data strategy, or let's say ontologies, let's describe that. We have all this information here, the various dimensions, the various levels, etc. So if you have comments, you can always leave a comment here. Unfortunately, though, you do have to have a GitHub account to make this work. So I hope it's free. You can just create a GitHub account very easily, but then you can add your comments right here. Or if you want to go further, you can go to the actual underlying. So each of these websites, in the upper right corner, you see the link to the underlying GitHub repository. It's all open, and you can start discussions here. You can raise issues there. So that's all relatively straightforward. Then we have the method website, where we basically say, okay, why do we need a method? We want to not boil the ocean, and we want to align with business strategy. We want to capture knowledge, etc. So these are all the objectives. Then we have, like, for example, composable business or bridging the gaps, avoiding disruption. And as you see, not everything is finished. So this is a living document, and we would like to apply agile principles here and make things better. So if you have a contribution to make, then please do so. Then we have all the concepts. We try the concepts of the method. We try to keep this list as simple as possible and as short as possible. So we describe what a use case is for different audiences again, from the business and management perspective, from the data and tech perspective. We describe what a use case is. It starts very simple with a name and a description, for example. But there's a whole life cycle where eventually use cases will be even deployable, will end up running. And also for building these use cases, we have a plan phase, a build phase, and a run phase. I think no one would disagree with that. That's how things work. So we try to work that out in this, and on this side, like in the plan phase, try to create a shared vision, shared by as many stakeholders as possible. Discover which use cases are applicable for the EKG, what would the EKG do well and not so well. Assess your situation, like do you have all the right skills and people and funding, etc. Do you have the right training in place, and chart yourself a roadmap. And on the building side, we would like to explain, okay, what do you need to have in place, allocate your team and resources, and mission and mandate, make the right designs, design your use case properly, implement the right mappings to the right ontologies and the right data sets, and so forth. So that's the method website. And then we have the catalog website, which is the least developed one. And what we're trying to do there is to kind of document actual websites. So we made one little start here with Client 360 that can be broken down in KYC, for example, and KYC has parts, crime records and sanctions, etc. These are all subdomains. And so at the highest level, the use case tree looks like a domain taxonomy in that sense. But when you drill down, you end up in components that can be delivered as independent, runnable modules of your knowledge graph. Then we would also like to publish data sets. And as you see, data sets, data products, we don't have anything yet. We need to first build a structure for these data sets. And that's what the new data workgroup is going to work on, data product workgroup. And of course, the same goes for ontologies. We would like to have the same catalog of enterprise-ready ontologies here. Let's go back to the presentation. So we have these four major activities, but now we're adding a fifth one, which is the data product workgroup. And this is how we think it will relate to all the other work that we do. So the data product workgroup will be our main focus for 2023, because there's a huge demand. There's a lot of very senior people working together now and starting to work together now. And we would like that to inspire the work that we already have. So the data product, for example, will come up with the capabilities that we need to document in the maturity model. What do you need to have in place for proper usage of data products in your organization, or development of data products in your organization? But also how to, like how do you organize this? How do you get to the point that you actually have proper semantic data products? And last but not least, if we also have actual data products from, for example, public vendors, then we would like to catalog them. So just a little bit more about this. So how do we see the relationship between data products and use cases? I think data products organize your information supply side. Like you can see the knowledge graph, the enterprise knowledge graph, as a bunch of data products that come together. You have, for example, your legal entities and your customers, etc., all nicely packaged as data products, but those data products should ideally not be built or developed or biased towards one particular use case. You want them to be as generic as possible and as reusable as possible. So multiple use cases may want to use your data product, and you don't know in advance which use cases will use your data product. So on the demand side of information demand, we would like to create these standards to define your business requirements, to cluster that and make a model of it, of course, with an ontology-based model. And somewhere in the middle, there will be all kinds of technology and governance topics that we also need to address. So yeah, I would like to announce the data product work group. Unfortunately, Tony Seal himself could not attend this call, so I do it for him. But Tony Seal is a knowledge graph architect at UBS, where UBS has publicly announced that they have the so-called UBS knowledge graph, which is quite a large-scale knowledge graph, potentially maybe even the largest that I know of. That is actually in production, and it's kind of a strategic initiative. So I'm very happy that that Tony Seal is joining the club and leading this initiative. And many senior experts of very reputable organizations have joined this, and so at the moment we are still in the bootstrap phase and setting up a charter for this work group. But we will soon publish that, start publishing that on a new website, data-product.ekgf.org, where we will create a similar website as the ones that I just showed you, with all the content that comes out of this work group. Now, a whole different topic. Like this is a EKGF process. It's a very it looks a little bit complicated here, but it's actually quite simple because it's so standard. It's based on the standard DevOps ideas. And this is standard stuff for anyone who uses GitHub. You basically read some content, like I just showed you, content on the website. It could also be an ontology, for example, or a data set that we publish. If you have an issue with it, you can raise that issue, and that would already be a fantastic contribution. We need more people raising issues. You could also go a little bit further and join actual workgroup calls and start working on actual content. Or become a reviewer, especially if you are an expert in a certain field. We would like to have as many experts as possible looking at our content, of course. And then, this is a list of all the various meetings that we have. And unfortunately, we made there's one missing here. That is the group that Omar is doing. It was too late to update this. But we have one other call here. But this list will be published on the website as well. So we have the maturity model calls weekly, the project organization calls run by Diane every Monday, the method calls every Friday. Then we have bi-weekly calls for the data product group, and alternating bi-weekly, the same Friday, same time slot. We have the EKG heads call. And then, last but not least, Pete is now doing all kinds of demonstration projects, basically use cases, working out actual use cases, and showing from front to back how to do this.
The important on that slide, go back a moment, please, Jacobus, is that these links are all live. They all work. The links to the meetings themselves, which are all done by Zoom. The links to the GitHub pages, which are free, as Jacob said, and the links to Slack. So the work that these individual groups do, whether it's a special interest group or a product like the maturity model, all of this is free and open to the world. And we're very proud of that fact. We're very proud of the fact that these people who work on these projects, on these work groups, contribute almost daily to what's going on, and the content is never lost. So next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
So what we're asking today, we have members. We're happy to have hundreds of individual members, literally, but we need user organizations. Our bylaws state that we should have corporate members who are users, but we don't have that. We have primarily vendors. We're really happy with our vendors, couldn't live without them, but we would like to have real users to become corporate members. And the users can be academic or they can be companies. We'd like support for these work groups and special interest groups. We'd like to have people who want to do their own special interest groups that we've not done before. By changing from the pillars, which are in support of the maturity model, to a more open, whatever you think is important, go for it. We are providing the opportunities for these people, whoever they are, you are, to propose a session, to attach to our Zoom platform, to go down to Slack, and to go for it. We would like the word to be spread. We had almost 100 people signed up for this session. I'm really happy to have you all here, but we need to do a much better job, clearly, of saying what enterprise knowledge graphs are, of saying that this is a foundation, which is a nonprofit for the good of all. That's how foundations work. And to spread the word. Tell people who you work with or work for or report to you about what we do and how their world will be better if they're part of what we all do together. So please reach out to us. Get onto the chat right now. Reach out through ekgf.org, info@ekgf.org. Look at the website. We are proud of what we do, but we would like to be more proud with more participation. Next slide, please.
Can I ask one question of you, Dennis?
Sure.
I've been a member in a number of organizations where we've tried to engage the corporations, and we want to get participation from individuals and organizations. The problem that I have seen over and over is when you try to engage individuals through organizations, then their participation is tied to their organizational responsibilities and the tenets of, let's just say, the legal constructs and constraints. There are things you can or cannot do and participate in as part of an organization. And it constrains many of the free-flowing contributions that we would like to see. If we engage an organization and an individual is tied to that, their previous participation could be quickly curtailed and or
well, okay, I understand, Jeffrey.
You know
we have both avenues. We have individual participants, like I believe you are, and we have participants that come in through their organization, and some do both. Right now, we are very, very heavily oriented towards individuals, and that's wonderful. The calls are free form, and that's also wonderful. And the problem with that, I'll take the opposite tack, is that seldom does what they say get back to their organization, and we depend upon the organizations for money, and we don't have enough of that at the moment.
All right.
We need the money.
Oh, yes, I understand. I understand that part of it.
Right. Not that it's going in any of our pockets, but
no.
Websites cost. Slack just changed their policy.
I saw that.
Free to you have to pay money. I only yesterday contacted them about, do they have a program for 501(c)s? And they said yes. So we'll be going after that. Yep. There are new tools that are coming out. Signal is one. I think that one's free. Jacobus always has wonderful ideas for what we should invest in. And I agree with his ideas, but we need some money, which means members to be able to support ongoing operations. Anybody else, please?
Alana Abdul has her hand up.
Alana.
Hi, Dennis. Yes, could you go back to the second to last slide where you said in terms of supporting EKGF, you need writers. What type of writers exactly, and what are you looking for?
Jacobus?
Well, that was said because we had, especially the maturity model call, where we saw that most calls, let's say 90% of them basically is much more about the discussion rather than the actual content. So we would like to make that separation between work groups and special interest groups, where the work groups are really focused on content, like publishable content. And what's missing is people who are good in writing it down, interviewing all the other people, and taking the lead for a particular topic, a particular page on the method side, or the maturity side, or on the data product group, and making sure that that content gets produced in a consistent, in a quality, with a certain level of quality, of course. And we need more of those people. Let's say it's like a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but they can only spend time on the call, but not off the call. So, like, and writing content is hard work, and not everyone can do it in the same way. So,
Exactly.
So it's more, I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's more writers for content management purposes rather than writers for publishing, say, articles on magazines to advertise.
also, yeah, of course.
Right.
Not content management is relatively easy because we just use GitHub for that. It's relatively straightforward, but no, it's about the actual content that we publish on the website, but also in the form
and that we help you publish. So toot your own horn. To go back into my background, I wrote many papers, including books, but they were all done a long time ago. And somehow we who are specialists in this, people like Mike Ushold, who's on this call, we tend to think, I know this, why doesn't everybody else? And that just doesn't get that. So we need to be able to, if you have an idea, an article, something you want to say, we can put out to the world of our thousands literally on our email list, write it down, tell us about it. We'll put it on the website and we'll broadcast it.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
Omar has done a great job of writing things. He did a tutorial. We're asking Omar to do more tutorials. Omar, you have anything to say about how you're going to proceed?
I think probably we'll proceed in the same fashion around smaller tutorials. I think people could use to get going on some things that they might find interesting within their whatever they're trying to work on with Enterprise Knowledge Graph. So just really sort of small little examples and things like that. We had a pretty good, pretty elaborate example last year where we took an article from the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, and we took it actually had we extracted triples from using NLP processes and things like that, and put that into like a Jupyter notebook that people could run. So that was pretty satisfying. So I intend to do more things like that. So that's it for me, Dennis.
Thank you. And Pete did an actual, I'll call it a data store of what happens in the movie industry. And he had a lot of participants helping. Pete, you want to talk about what your work was?
Well, what we're trying to do is a demonstrator. For the work we've done on the data pillar in maturity model, we had things like data sets and ontologies we were describing the capabilities for and the criteria for. But in order to prove that they really made sense for real, we actually built a small, actually it turned out to be fairly large, but a small use case focused on the movie industry, because that's what a lot of people understand. So we didn't want to go into something more arcane like finance. So the use case was you're a studio executive in a movie studio, and you've got to decide how you want to spend your budget based on a theoretical number of proposed movie projects with some directors and actors attached, and a plot line and some genres, and then comparing the performance of past movies with the proposals. So we did a lot of data integration, ontology modeling, vocabulary modeling, and really sort of proving the ideas out for real and doing integrations with things like IMDb. We did a trial, and we now work on Wikidata and some other sources of movie data, and bring all that together. And we actually put it up on a knowledge graph on the web, using a cloud-based version of GraphDB, which Ontotext gradually kindly sort of donated for our use. So that's available for querying and so on. So it's really just about proving stuff for real with a real project.
And continued participation. So I see Tony Coates on this call. Tony, you were really a big contributor.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I also wanted to say that we do have a hand up as well.
Okay. So after I ask Tony what he's up to these days, let's go to the hand up.
Oh, what am I up to these days? I mean, I still data modeling things. So, so anyway, I just came on to see where you guys are up to. I think this is quite a big topic. The kind of productization of data sets. It's an interesting one, but it's not like I have it on the radar of my employer or anything like that at this point. I think it will become more interesting if enough people agree to start providing the information that way, then it becomes harder to ignore.
I think that's right. Are you in London or are you in New York? I've forgotten.
No, London.
In London. So you used to work on FIBO while you were riding the train, as I recall.
I did indeed, yeah.
Yeah, that was lots of fun. So where's the hand up, Janine?
Michael Ashford.
Michael?
Yes. Hi, Dennis. Nice to see a few familiar faces. A couple of small things. One, the enterprise, well, maybe a big thing, but the enterprise ontologies catalog where you have enterprise ready ontologies out there for the public to use. And that's a neat idea. I wonder whether you think that's very likely, because most of the enterprise clients we work with don't let their stuff out the door.
That's a very good question. Without that happening, unfortunately, I think this is very difficult. But with the increasing number of regulations, going back to my FIBO days, I think they're going to have to. And there's some organizations, there's some things that we do every day, like fly airplanes or fly in airplanes, where those data stores are shared by law, the same way that we can track ships around the world. So those data stores are shared by law, maybe not with ontologies or graphs, but they're shared. So where does it need to go next, Mike? What do you think?
Well, one target I think might be nonprofits. In other words, we do a little bit of work with nonprofits and government organizations, so they're more willing to publish their ontologies.
Yeah.
And this doesn't require actual complete knowledge graph ontologies from an enterprise. We're talking about sort of modular reusable ontologies,
Yes.
including your own GIST ontology,
Yes.
Mike,
Yeah.
and things like the global legal entity identifier ontology, which I created for Glyph, and obviously FIBO. So, but there are a number of ontologies out there, including from academia, which are not necessarily enterprise ready and don't meet our principles. So we see ourselves as doing more of a curation job, not necessarily spawning a huge number of new ontologies, but really sort of reviewing and curating a set of
I think it's
already out
encouraging that there might be an ontology repository that's not an ontology dumpster, because there's lots of them out there.
Right.
To curate. But I had another separate question. Dennis mentioned interest in people writing things, and then you publish it on your site. Dave McComb of Semantic Arts writes quite a lot of things, and he recently wrote an article comparing FAIR principles with data-centric kind of ontologies, and it's a really quite good article. I just wondered, is there a vehicle whereby you would say, oh, here's an article somebody published that we want to make more widely known?
Absolutely. Janine?
Yes. If you have an article that you've written, please submit it to us. And we have published people's articles on our website. So we of course would ask for permission, but we are extremely open to that.
But this would be more
share, and we also share in our email.
This would, if the article is, well, this is a case where an organization, Dave writes for an organization and they publish it on their website. So it would be more publishing a link to it rather than publishing an article.
We do that. We do that also.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to do that. So when I said about flying, those websites, those data stores that are connected are, of course, the weather, the schedules of all the airlines, the the way flights are planned, all of that, the flight aware, those are all shared.
Yeah, no, I think it's good.
Jeffrey Wallach.
Asking a question, I think.
The question was, how do we create an open source model to support the vision you laid out?
We're all about that. Jacobus?
To support the vision?
How do we support an open source model to support the vision?
Yes, well, by first defining what it is. So what is a vision, and should we support any vision or just a knowledge graph vision or a data-centric vision? So yes, of course, I think everything we do eventually should ideally end up as content for the knowledge graph itself. So we can possibly automate it, and have processes around it, governance around, for example, how does your vision evolve? How does it link to other to strategy, tactics, projects, business processes, etc. Like anything you can model should be modeled, I think.
In terms of the open source, there was a slide about the process. We're managing everything in Git, and we've got a versioning, a governance process, and we've addressed copyright issues. We default to the Creative Commons by attribution license, but people can choose to, we can negotiate if you want a different copyright license. We do acknowledge and keep the copyright of contributors. So you're not giving stuff away and losing copyright over it. We continue to keep the original contributors' copyright on that while releasing it under Creative Commons.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I wanted to just tap into what you just mentioned, Jakovich. I think that the key concern is that we don't focus on our components as the vision. We focus on the use cases that are relevant to the consumers, the customers, if you will, that will want to use this. And if they see that those are, if we can create a marketplace for semantic components that are reusable, then we will draw them in and they will have no problem funding because they will see the payback because they're consuming something that they find valuable.
So that's exactly the goal. That's what we hope that this catalog website will turn into, and it will take a long time. It's not going to happen anytime soon, not this year, probably even, but in the next couple of years, we hope that this, like you see, every successful technology stack, like JavaScript, for example, has this central place where you can download components, like npmjs.org for JavaScript, for example, where you find hundreds of thousands of components that people can download. You have that for every technology stack. Maven Central does the same for the Java world, and PyPy.org does the same for the Python world, etc. So I think we need that for the knowledge graph world as well, that you can, because there's so much work to do, like standard stuff like legal entities and jurisdictions and regions and all that reference data stuff, for example, or connecting to your Active Directory LDAP service. That's all standard out-of-the-box stuff that you should be able to download, deploy in your knowledge graph without any, like how to build a knowledge graph in 5 minutes, basically, for all that standard stuff.
Kind of stuff. So I didn't see, thank you, Jacobus. I didn't see Mike Bennett until just a moment ago. So Mike, when he began to participate with us, was about the time I think that he began connected with OMG again. So congratulations on that. When Mike attended one of his first meetings back with us, he said that I was working for a month trying to solve a problem for a client. And I connected to, I forget which one of the pillars, and you guys had the answer. So that made me so happy. We had some answer for a great guy like Mike Bennett. How you doing, Mike?
Hi, Dennis. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, I came in a bit late and I couldn't find the hand icon, so I thought I'd loom at you instead. I've been sitting here for about 10, 20 minutes. That was pretty late. Looming works. So this is me on my boat in Vancouver, by the way. So I've changed locations for a bit. So
are you changing accents too? You're going to speak like a Canuck?
I don't think so. No, I lost my Zimbabwean accent a long time ago, and I think I'll stick with Surrey and South London now, wherever I turn up. So, but Yeah, so I just started at the OMG as the technical director, and we've got a bunch of little modular ontologies that were originally the 5.0 Foundation stuff that are now being published as OMG standards, known as OMG Commons. Previously, and Pete's been involved with these as well, we had the MVF standard, which is still there, but the Commons ontology are now their own thing. There's some good ones about things like codes and identifiers and classification codes and all that fit together really nicely that I used at a big Canadian bank a couple of years back. And more of that foundational stuff is being moved over into this Commons thing now. So those are going to be reusable. They're knowledge graph friendly. You know, they're about putting meaning to the data. They're not my kind of conceptual ontology that talks about just the conceptual meaning, but this is pragmatic data.
So Mike, you're finally getting real?
Yeah, well, the OMG is. I am. I've always said, you know, there's a time for the real data ones and there's a time for the concept ones and how they connect together. I'm an old-fashioned engineer. I like to, you know, have a computationally independent view. But these are very nice data-facing, reusable enterprise knowledge graph type of ontologies. They're refactoring the language and countries and currencies codes ontology. That's there as well. That's using more of these new foundations as well. So I'm trying to think, as well as codes and things, there's a number of other basic high-level concepts. So eventually we'll see. We won't have contract there yet. I don't think that's still in 5.0, but more and more of those foundational terms, you know, places and you know, entities, that kind of stuff, will all be in that reusable commons set. And we're looking at the OMG at how to do this kind of ontology curation, the kind of machinery that Jacobus and Dennis and Tony and Dean and a couple of others put together all those years back, which is starting to become the norm now. I see a lot of other ontology development framework now that was being presented at the Ontology Summit a couple of months back. That's sort of doing the same kind of thing. You know, you GitHub, you do your pull request, you check it in, you make sure that people have reviewed it, all that kind of stuff. So we're looking at how to do more of that machinery in the OMG as well to support those ontologies.
So we have that within EKGF, thanks to Jacobus and Pete and others. It works. Thank you, Mike.
Right.
I can't see hands.
So, and I saw a paper by Gary Berg-Cross that I reviewed. I'm not sure when it's going to be published. It was applying FAIR principles to ontology metadata. So we should have a look at that when it comes out.
So Mike Eichel, does that relate to what you were talking about? The paper. We can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry, what was the question? I was distracted by for a moment.
Mike Bennett talked about something that a paper by Gary Berg-Cross relating FAIR principles to something else. And you had mentioned FAIR.
That sounds strongly related. I haven't seen that paper by Gary Prost, but that's probably worth reading. By the way, I did send a link in the chat to the paper that I mentioned about Dave. Yeah, those are probably quite some overlap there, I would guess.
Good, wonderful. We'll figure it out.
Eric, question.
We have another question by Nina, and then also Eric has his hand up. Nina wants to know, is this work any way related or collaborated with open knowledge network effort, or would it be eventually?
Jacobus?
To be honest, I cannot answer the question because I don't know that. I have to be very honest.
Maybe Nina can provide some link that we can research that. I've never heard of that either. Anybody else heard of that? I guess not.
Okay, we'll reach out to Nina then.
Reach out to Nina.
That's okay.
Sure.
Eric Standring.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to follow up on what Mike was saying about OMG and tie it, if possible, into Guy Rackham and the Baking Industry Architecture Network, and potentially if there's a partnership regarding reuse of their service domain landscape, which is essentially a SOA architecture, and put it in the context of what I think, Dennis, you said, relevant to flight aware, where there's public data. And so the use case is around the 2008 financial crisis, and at least in the US, the corresponding law that requires these large 7 or so banks to conform to an exchange of they're called critical services between service providers and service receivers, and it's a network, so it's a perfect application of knowledge graph. And I was wondering what in that space might be a union between what Buy-in has done and what might be available in the OMG Commons, so that they would support the Dodd-Frank law for identifying, critical services and the facilities and the people and the systems and the vendors that are required to sustain the American economy and the global economy. That connection, which is essentially a knowledge graph. Meaning, is there a partnership? Because we're looking at Buy-in as, for our MECE landscape of services, and I'm talking about SOA services, but in the context of Dodd-Frank, those are critical services that would need to be run after a bank's critical operation went bankrupt. It would need to be run by another party. I'm sorry, that may be kind of a difficult question to answer. It's quite a long-winded.
Okay.
Did you get any of it, Dennis?
Absolutely. It means we have some work to do, because we know those organizations, but we're not connected to them at the moment. When I was the FIBO person, we did do some work with Buy-in as much as we could, and with other organizations like insurance, who are very much involved with the financial industry. With EKGF, what we'd like to have happen, Eric, and perhaps you're the person who can do it, is to come in with a special interest group who says that we would like to make these connections between Buy-in and the other four-letter words that you said, as part of an ontology that can be connected to other ontologies. So, Eric, I'm handing it back to you. We have not done any of that work, but would like to do it.
And so, independent of Buy-in, just looking at the OMG Commons, if that ontology is available for free and is, essentially a reuse repository of standard components, then I think maybe the question is, who on the line has done work around compliance to the Dodd-Frank requirements? And that means understanding exchanges of critical services that would sustain the American economy and the global economy, and actually have those dependent data, which are edges essentially for vendor systems, people, and facilities. Is anyone on the line already done that work? Because it's used across our...
Up. Okay. Jacobus and Mike Bennett.
I did that for the SR14 regulation at the Bank of New York. Critical services, critical operations, business functions, critical anything, a knowledge graph, enterprise knowledge graph, and all that data went to the Fed. With like a regulatory system running in production for many years.
And that's recovery and resolution planning?
Yes, like the living will.
Right. Okay, thanks.
And I know Elisa Kendall's doing some work with the Department of Homeland Security, I think it is, or maybe DARPA or someone like that, looking at preserving critical infrastructure from or financial dependencies in case of continuity. So I don't know if you know Elisa Kendall. I can connect you with her if you're interested.
No, I don't. That'd be great.
And that's making use of FIBO or extensions of FIBO.
Yeah, we were using FIBO as well.
Yep. Mike Bennett.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question. When you mentioned about the sort of 7 largest banks and so on, I was wondering, is there anything there to do with BCBS 239 as well, which is global, it's the Basel Committee for Banking Supervision, and
not as much.
Globally systemically important financial institutions, because that actually sets out how you should report using, they say, taxonomies and metadata, but effectively things like ontologies, but not what report you should do. It's not that well coordinated compared to what you're describing. So anyway, sorry.
I mean, there's an overlap, but I believe the regulation that we're talking about for requirements for compliance is the 165D. It's called article, and it talks about number one is what is critical to the sustaining of the economy, and they're in terms of operations. So critical operations, and there's about settlements, payments, and 2 or 3 other types of operations. So those are defined in that regulation, and then the banks need to respond by saying, yeah, here are the services that sustain those critical operations, and they have to inventory them. And then they need to connect with high data quality, the corresponding, like I said, the service components, which are people, systems, vendors, and buildings that would need to be available should a financial stress event occur like what happened in 2008. So it's pretty focused on sustaining the economy by being able to package that network in a cohesive chunk with high data quality at any given time, because all those pieces change. And so that somebody else can pick up that chunk of that service chunk, basically a bunch of work to sustain a critical operation, but run by a different entity, right? It's not the entity that went bankrupt. It's what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, essentially here in California recently.
Yeah, living with provisions, basically.
So we're past our time, and we're happy to continue or to say thank you very much to all of you. Could you go to the last slide, please, Jacobus? So thank you very much. We're going to call the meeting to a close. It'll be posted on our website, so you can get access to it in your time. We hope to see you all again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.